Hello and welcome to Luminar Coffee Break. Today is our Friday weekly wrap-up and I am joined by my co-host Vanelli, and we're going to discuss the topics we went over earlier this week. For me, that is 3 ways that you can make a landscape image look great, quick and easy stuff. And I'm also going to talk about how to make sure you have if you're using Lightroom Classic, how to make sure you have the plugin installed properly and how to use Luminar AI as a plugin. Now let me go ahead and switch my screen here. Oops, let me go here. There's Vanelli. Vanelli, what do you have for us this week?
Hey, well, I'm going to work with on ways to make a portrait look its best, and then how to create beautiful black and whites.
Awesome. Well, I'll jump in and go first if you don't mind, and we'll talk a little bit about landscape photography. So up
Sounds
here on my
good.
screen, I've got a beautiful image that was captured by one of our ambassadors. I believe it was in Cappadocia during a balloon festival. And you're going to be really surprised when I click on the before image here. What a change I was able to make with just a few small adjustments. So when I'm editing landscape images, the 3 things I pay most attention to are going to be my composition, my contrast, and my color. So with this image, we had a lot of contrast work to work on. So if I click on the before, you can see it's a very flat image, very hazy. We also popped the color and we brought out some details. The composition I think is already great. There was not any additional cropping that I would recommend for this photo. So let me quickly walk you through how I edited it so you can put these things to use in your own workflow. I'm going to right click on the image, go to adjustments, and revert this to the original. And you'll see the image goes flat again. And I started with this image in templates, and I used one of my favorites. It's called Fast Fix. You can see I've already got it marked with a heart here. If I go back to our main templates menu, it's under the scenery category down here. That's where you'll find Fast Fix, and I find that to be a really great all-around template for a lot of, well, landscape photography specifically, but for a lot of different types of images. It just gives a fast, better starting point. Adds a little bit of contrast, adds a little bit of color, but it doesn't take it over the top. It still gives you room to add whatever creative touches that you want. It's just a little bit better. So there's the before and the after. From there, I went over to the edit tab, and when I'm editing a landscape photo, I mentioned the 3 things I'm looking for are composition, contrast, and color. Well, the 3 tools that I find in Luminar AI that give me the most bang for my buck are going to be Enhance AI, Structure AI, and the Landscape tool. There's a lot of other great tools here that you can use, but those 3 are going to get me pretty much all the way there for what I want to do with this image. So we'll start with Enhance AI, and we can see that the template we applied already added some effect here. I'm going to bring that Accent AI up a little higher, and you'll see that's adding some contrast. It's making the colors a little bit better. I'm also going to bring up the Sky Enhancer and watch what this does just to the sky. It's adding a bit more definition to these clouds and pulling in a little bit more color. Now, I'm going to go to Structure next, and I want to add some mid-tone contrast with the structure, but I really only want it here in my foreground. I can pull up that amount slider pretty high, and it makes that foreground look great, but it's almost overdoing it here on the clouds. So I'm going to use my gradient mask and quickly just draw a gradient here from the bottom, and everything in red is going to get the effect. Everything not in red will be protected. So now we've added that extra contrast, that mid-tone contrast with Structure AI just to the foreground. So that's looking really good right there. I'm going to go ahead and close that up and go down to the Landscape tool. And this is where we can start to get a little creative and have some fun. Dehaze is amazing at pulling detail out of hazy, foggy situations like this. It also intensifies color a little bit. So as I dragged this to the right, look what it's doing to those clouds. It's brought out some beautiful pink tones, and it's really cut through that haze to where now we see the balloons a little bit more clearly as they rise out of that fog and that mist. We can also add a little bit of golden hour just to make those tones here in the foreground where that light's coming through, make it a little bit more rich. And I think that looks absolutely gorgeous. We can even pull that golden hour up a little bit more. Now, as I look at this image, I think it looks great. Let's take a look at our before and our after. We've made some really tremendous changes here. And if you're looking at this between the before and the after and you think, okay, I like it, but maybe I overprocessed it a little bit, you can always go down to this overall amount slider here at the bottom right and pull back on that slider. A lot of times I find between 70 to 80% is actually the sweet spot. So I'll do my edits. I typically apply them a little bit heavy and then I pull everything back just to get exactly where I want. So make sure you're taking some time to look at the before and after as you go through using that on every single tool. We have this little switch here so you can turn it off and on to see what that tool's doing and use that to kind of build step by step, making sure you're paying attention to your contrast, your color, and your composition. And if you're just getting started, the three tools I would really focus in on, like I said, are going to be Enhance AI, Structure AI, and the Landscape tool. What do you think about that, Vanelli?
Oh, that's awesome. Great job. I love how you just brought out the color in that scene. So now,
It's really
as you know,
cool. What?
I'm here. One,
Oh, I was just going to say how dehaze brings out the color, but go ahead.
no, no, exactly. So that dehaze, I can't believe the wonders it does. And it's funny because it's under the landscape tools, but you can also use them on portraits. And especially for an outdoor portrait. Don't forget to use it for that too.
Awesome. All right. So, what do you have for us today? You're going to talk a little bit about how
So,
to improve a portrait
portrait.
photo, right?
Yep.
Do you want to go ahead and
As you can
switch to
tell,
your? There we go.
as you can tell, I'm not in the studio today. I came. I was in Orlando, Florida, last week, and now I'm in Connecticut for the wrap up. So we're here. I'm going to be teaching a couple classes on lighting and ways to improve your portraits. We'll introduce those on later episodes of Coffee Break. So what I want to do is I have a picture here of my beautiful little cousin Angelique. Now, the goal for creating a really good portrait template is to make sure you start with one that has a good solid base. So instead of selecting already made templates, in fact, here's the ones SP um, for start or quick starts is what I want, or starting point. Instead of me selecting one of the starting points I want to work with, I'm going to show you how I created a starting point. So the templates are phenomenal, and that's what I recommend you usually jump to. But if you're a portrait photographer and you want to create your own, think about the tools you use on a regular basis. So for portrait photography, the first thing I'm going to do is jump over here to Enhance AI, and I'm going to crank that up and give it a generous amount. Now, the majority of the tools I want to use right now are AI. And the reason for that is with this AI tool, when I apply it to another portrait, it's going to reanalyze everything I just did. It's going to look at it and say, oh, okay, well, 53 is the value amount that you selected for Accent AI. So the next portrait can go up to 53. So it knows enough that if it doesn't need it, color, detail, enhance the tonal range. If it doesn't need it, it doesn't apply it. So in this case, just real quick, before, look at this, and after that one little slider. Then I like to jump down to light, and here's super contrast. So even though, look at that, even though super contrast is part of the light tool, it's still part of the AI system. Now, these two down here, black and the white points or sliders, are not part of the AI system. So these are going to be fixed. In other words, the numbers I just dialed in are hard fixed. It's always going to be minus 23, always plus 17. Whether it needs it or not, that's what it's going to do. So as long as you keep that in your mind, you could tweak those afterwards. Now, I come down to the portrait tools. Once again, all of this is AI. So for face light, I'm just going to give it just a little bit. I'm not going to mess with slimming of the face because not all faces need to be slimmed. That's something that once you apply the starting point to, you can attempt it. Since this is a female, I want to be generous with my skin softening. And for shine removal, she doesn't have any here or much, but I'm still going to add it because it's AI. If the next image has shine in it, it'll detect it and clean it up. If it doesn't, it bypasses it. All right. Now, by the way, we go back up to face. Eyes. Eyes are extremely important. I want to come down here to eye enhancer, and again, give it a generous amount. Pop back in. Here we go. A generous amount to the eye. I like adding a little eye flare. Oh, this is extreme. Look at that. Look what it's doing to the eyes. Let me zoom in a little more. In fact, you know what? There we go, Angela. All right. I love what that eye flare does. It's acting as if I had a little reflector bouncing light back in. Again, because it's a female, I want to, well, anyone, remove the dark circles under the eyes, but I do want to improve her eyebrows. And then for her mouth, I wouldn't do this to a guy's portrait. Make the lips a little richer in red. Look at that. Now, for teeth, there's no teeth in this image, but I am going to put it at around 30 because remember, you're going to get sick of me saying it, it's AI. If there's no teeth in the scene, it doesn't change. If there are teeth, it'll take care of it. So here's before and after. Look how it just jumps right at you. So now the next part is body. I'm going to leave that alone because again, not everyone needs their body either, brought in or expanded out. So those are the tools I won't use yet. Super contrast is not part of the AI family. Man, I just absolutely love it. Look at this. Look how I have control over the highlights, the midtones, and the shadows. And I know, look at that, right about there. Awesome. I know I'm going to use that. I know it. So therefore, I might as well add it into this template. So what this is really doing for you is you're able to look, and if there's any dots next to these tools, that means that tool was used in this template. So it's almost like a cheat sheet for you. Let me go over the details also, by the way. That I do want to increase the medium details. Small and large, just a touch. I like forming a triangle here. And last, while I'm at it, once again, Structure AI is part of the AI family. I'm going to give it maybe a quarter, right about here. That's good. If it needs it, it'll use it. If it doesn't need it, it won't use it. And absolutely last, I like adding a vignette. And like we've always said before, if they know you've added a vignette, if you can see it, then you obviously went too far. I'm going to go to an extreme for a moment. And I do want to feather the daylights out of this. There we go. And just add just a little inner light. Now let's dial it back a bit and actually let's put it right about here. Good. Now I'm going to dial it back quite a bit. And put the size there. And here we go. Before. And Michelle just ties it in just a little bit right there. All right. Before. After. All right. So here we go. Angela. These are my favorite portrait tools. So I use them. And I will use, maybe let's say if I want to replace the sky, I can replace the sky. Maybe I want to add a new LUTs to the scene. I can still do all that. But I want to use the tools I use the most. I want to start with that and then build from it. So I'll come down here and click Save. Now if I go back to Templates, under My Templates, there it is, the new one I just created. Let me rename it. Let's call it starting point. A female portrait. Here we are. So, let's start edit, history, and go to the bottom. So here's the original. And now you just got done doing a photo shoot. This image pops up on your screen. You know it's going to be a portrait edit. So you could just click, and I spelled it wrong. Let me rename it real quick. There we go. Got it. So now look what I just did. In one simple click, I have a great starting point for my portrait. Now for Angelique, I think I'm really gonna like, if I come down here, let's say I want to add a little more creativity to it. This Orton effect I really like. So I want to do Orton effect soft and bring it right about here. And let's make it darker instead of brighter. There we go. And pop up the contrast a little bit. Before, after. So now I just took that starting point, which took us what, less than a second to add. Now I can go in and change it up slightly by adding some special of my other favorite tools like Glow or even Mystical. You know, I can add it to these scenes, and it didn't take me that long to actually create because I started with a good starting point. All right. So how's that, Angela?
That was great. I think it's a beautiful portrait and beautifully edited. A couple of things that I would point out is when you save that custom template as your starting point, to note that when you place the vignette somewhere other than center, that is going to be where that vignette is placed in that template. So if you apply it to a different portrait with where your subject's face is in a different area, you might need to reposition that vignette. So keep that in mind. And then for all of those AI tools, like Vanelli mentioned, so many of them are human aware, and they'll apply an effect if a human is in the image, such as with the portrait tools. And then with the enhance AI and the structure AI, those are also human aware in that they don't apply nearly as much. It applies almost no change to the person's face. It retains skin tones, it retains textures, all of those things. So you get a much better quality result than having, just a slider positioned at a single point. They're a little smarter than that. So that's pretty cool.
Awesome.
All right.
Well, what do you have next?
So we're going to talk a little bit about Lightroom and Luminar AI as a plugin. So I walked you through the specific setup steps earlier this week. So if you need some help with that, I encourage you to go back and watch that episode. For now, what we're going to do is I'm going to show you quickly how to make sure that that plugin is installed. It should be installed automatically when you install Luminar AI. It's a step in the install process, but sometimes people can easily skip over it. We're all in the habit of just clicking next, next, next. And if you miss that step where you forgot to install the plugin, all you need to do is then launch Luminar AI as a standalone and then go up to the Luminar AI menu, Luminar AI menu, and click on Install Plugins. And you'll just want to make sure that if you have Photoshop and Lightroom on your system, that these both say uninstall. That gives me the option to uninstall it. If those say install, click install, make sure Lightroom and Photoshop are both closed, then click done, and then restart Lightroom or Photoshop, whichever one you're working with, and then those plugins will then be included in that software. So I'm going to click done on that for now. I'm going to go back to Lightroom, and this is an edit we did earlier this week using Luminar AI as a plugin, and here was our original. So it's a little bit blown out, but what I loved about this image was that we have this one kind of reddish-orange ranunculus in a sea of yellow. So I really wanted to make this image, this flower here, stand out. So I'm going to right-click on this image. I'm going to go down to Export. And right here under Luminar AI, we have Edit a Copy with Lightroom Adjustments or Open Source Files. If you open the source file, that's going to open your raw image or your unedited JPEG, whatever format your image is initially in without any Lightroom edits, it's going to open that source file. So for me, that's a CR2 Canon RAW file. If I choose edit a copy with Lightroom adjustments, it'll take whatever adjustments I've made in Lightroom, put them into a TIFF file, and then send that high resolution TIFF over to Luminar AI for editing. It's really up to you which one you choose. It's just a matter of deciding which one you want to be your raw processor. So in this instance, I'm going to let Luminar be my raw processor and my raw conversion tool. So I'm going to click open source files, and that's going to send it over to Luminar AI so I can edit that image from scratch. So we'll give that a moment to load up. It does take a little bit longer when you're using it as a plugin rather than clicking through them in a catalog and going directly into the edit module. But there we go, it just popped up. And it pops up right into the template view. I'm going to skip that today and go straight to edit. And the first thing I want to do is composition. And I want to bring my crop in so that this red-orange flower here is, is getting a little bit more attention. So I'm going to drag in the sides here. And I'm going to straighten this out ever so slightly. Bring that in maybe a little bit more. And then down. And that's a pretty good crop. I'll hit return on my keyboard and roll with that. Next thing I want to do is go to my Enhance AI and pull that up. You'll see that that's affecting the color, the tone. It's cooling, it's taking down some of the highlights, it's pulling up some of the shadows, just balancing things out really nicely. I also want to do a little bit of structure AI, but I really only want that to affect the flower. So I'm going to pull my structure up until I like what that flower is looking like. And then I'm going to grab my masking tools here, and I'm going to do a radial mask really quick and just mask this over my flower. And right now I have it selected the opposite of what I want. It's everything in red is going to be affected and everything inside my circle is not affected. I want the opposite of that. So I'm going to click the other button here, switch that around to now my flower is getting that mask and everything else outside of it is protected. So I'm going to turn off that mask overlay. On Mac, that is a keyboard shortcut, the / here, but you can also find it on Windows by clicking on the ellipses and show and hide mask. And that's just going to turn on that overlay so you can see where the masking is taking place. So now I've added my structure just to the flower. I want to do the same thing with details. So I'm going to go to that ellipses and copy my mask. Now we'll go down to the details panel, and I'm going to pull my small details up just a little, and a little bit of medium details, and I'm going to pull my large details back. And I really want this, again, just to affect the flowers. So I'm going to click on the masking, go to the ellipses, and paste that mask. And now those changes to the details are only taking place right here on my flower. Another step I think I would take here is super contrast. And we do still have some hot highlights. You can see right here in the center of the flower, it's still a little bit overly bright. So I'm going to pull up that highlights contrast, and you'll see that brings back that detail in that brighter area of the flower absolutely beautifully. I might even enhance that a little bit more by pulling that balance to the right a little further, and I think that looks great. The one last thing I want to do to this image is add a nice big soft vignette. So I'll go to the vignette tool, pull my amount slider all the way down to the left, and I'm going to pull my size slider quite a bit down to the left as well. We'll go into our advanced settings. I'm going to change the roundness to make this a little bit more the shape of my subject. Pull that feathering way, way, way up because I want it to be a big soft vignette. Tiny bit of inner light. We just spent so much time correcting those highlights. I don't want to add too much inner light because it's just going to make that flower overly bright again. Now that we have our vignette set, we can click on Choose Subject and move this over to where our flower is in the center of the vignette, and everything else you can see very clearly what's being affected and what isn't. Now to make this not look ugly like it is right now, I'm going to grab the amount slider and pull that back up and just move it around until I think it looks relatively natural, and it just brings your attention to the right side of the image and really highlights that beautiful red-orange flower in the sea of yellow. Click on Choose Subject again to go ahead and turn that off, and we can take a look at our before and the after. Did a beautiful job, and now I can click apply, and that will take it round trip right back to Lightroom, put it in there next to my image, my original image, and there we go. Just a second here for it to load up. There we go. And there's our edit for today. So, Vanelli, what do you think about that?
That is great. I like how you did that. What else I like is how it jumped right back into Lightroom. Now, you did hear a couple people in some of the forums say, "Oh my God, it comes back into Lightroom, but not in the same order." That's because they don't have the order set in Lightroom. It's not a Luminar thing. It's Lightroom. You have it set to um, modifying date. So
Correct.
it's not going to be the same. Change it to name, and
Hmm.
you'll have them right next to each other.
Absolutely. All right. Looks like there's maybe a couple questions here in the chat. Uh, Ian says, recent convert to Luminar AI has revolutionized photo editing for me. That's so cool to hear. Jerry is enjoying 2 coffee breaks today. Thank you so much for your support. That's awesome. Hello, Julie, Harry. So glad to see so many familiar names and faces. It's awesome. So, what was the last subject you had for us today, Vanelli?
Okay, do you want to share my screen?
I can. There we go.
So, as Kevin LaRue said, oh my God, let's remember the rescue kitten Olive I worked with. So, Olive is before Piper. He said I need to give the kitten royalties for using it so much. But here's what I want to do. I want to show you beautiful black and whites on something that's, how do I put this? It's different. It's not the same typical black and whites I've always worked with. And I found it while working on some of these pet photography. Now, where do I start? The best part about Luminar is we can start it and end at any position we want. Like in Photoshop, in Lightroom, Photoshop, you have to start from point A and work your way down. Luminar, if I want to crop this, I can crop it at the end of the event or in the beginning of the edit. I can do anything I want. That's the cool thing about this. So what I am going to do is I want to apply a template first. This is, I believe, a paid template, or it's free with Luminar X members, and it's amazing animals. I stumbled upon this one right here. Look at that. One click. How I love it. Because we've always said you don't want the person to, if the person looks at it and says, wow, that's a great vignette. That means you went overboard. But here's where we break the rules. I love what they did with this vignette. Let me go right to it. Something I didn't think of doing. So the amount is 100%, but look at the feather. They brought the feather up to 100%. So that's why it doesn't look too harsh. This looks more like a pinhole camera, which I really like. So I love where that took us. For this particular image, I want to jump down here to optics. And I wish while I was there, I shot with a wide angle lens. I didn't. Oh, but look at that. I can make it appear like I did. Now I can come back up here. And what's bothering me about the image is the crop. So now I can address that issue. Let's say here. Boom. Great. Oh, bounce back. Now I'll come right back one moment. And here it comes. There it is. All right, look at that. Now let's jump back over to the black and white tool. And here's where we're going to really start getting the extra out of the black and white by adjusting the colors, the luminance of the colors. You wouldn't think that's a big deal, but watch this. Here's red. Look at her nose, his nose. Look at that. So we know there's red in the image. I'm going to go to extreme. Look at the yellows. Let's make it darker. Obviously, there's plants. There's a lot of greens. Cyan, you don't notice it as much. But here's something very interesting. Look at Olive's fur. Look at that. So there's definitely blue in his fur. And then, of course, magenta. Again, probably with the nose. Yep, with the nose. Look, there it is. So before, after. Then Obviously, since it's black and white, it's going to scream for details. But notice what they did here. They took the small details and they made it a negative. So the finest of the details, they kind of blurred them out just a bit, but they brought up sharpening, large and medium details. So I thought this was pretty cool, adding that negative effect to the smallest of the details in the scene. So let me show you before and after. There's before, and there's after. So Angela, what did you think of that?
Oh, I love it, and such a cute kitten. You know, the one thing I would do a little differently would be up under the luminance in your black and white. I actually liked it when you put the blues a little bit more to the right and lightened up olives for a little bit. It just made the cat stand out a little bit more in the image, and especially with such a dark vignette, it just really draws the eye right in, and it also lightened up the eyes a little bit too. Yeah.
And people are asking, can Face AI adjust animal portraits? As of now, no. It's human aware. So I think it did the gorilla one. Well, it did me, so I know I know it does. You know, larger animals. No, but it doesn't do cats. And I wish it did. But as of right now, it's human aware, and it knows enough. There's eyes, nose, mouth, and so
Hmm.
on.
Yeah, I find that it does work reasonably well on primate eyes because they're fairly close to human eyes. But other animals, it's really hit and miss. So,
Exactly.
yeah, just you can try it, but a lot of times the easier thing to do is to get in there with the local masking and just use a small brush to pull up the structure, maybe add a little tiny bit of exposure, open up the shadows if you need to, and then also bring the contrast up a little higher. Make sure the black part of their eye, the iris, is nice and rich, and then bring out the detail around it. So you can do some really great things with that local masking. However, it would be really cool if that AI was cat aware or animal aware, maybe in the future.
Yeah.
All
There we
right.
go.
Well,
I'm
I
doing a
think
real
that
quick.
pretty much covers everything we had for this week. Vanelli, did you have anything else?
Nope, that's it.
All right. Well, it
Now,
looked
Angela,
like,
I'll be here, um, like I said, doing a portrait class and teaching Luminar. I'll be here until Monday. I'll be back in time for the um, for the coffee break at 5 o'clock, and we have some really cool stuff. I'm dying to show everyone. I've been working on some of these projects,
yep.
but over the weekend, it's very important to start doing projects. Do something to get you out there shooting and get your mind active. When you come back in, you can start working on some of your edits.
Fantastic advice. Yeah, definitely get out there, take some pictures this weekend. I know I'm intending to do that as well. So thank you so much for spending some of your afternoon, evening with us, wherever you are in the world. We really appreciate it. If you have any questions for us, make sure you pop them into the chat or into the comments below. Vanelli and I keep an eye on those frequently, and we do our best to get those questions answered. And if you're enjoying this series, make sure you give us a thumbs up here on YouTube. We love seeing that. Our producers love seeing that. And we will see you next week. Thanks and bye.